and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, Bounce Back versus Texas edition, which is not a word I thought I would say.
John names the entire episode after the first game of a four-game series and made it look foolish.
That was a fun game. I'm John Bonus of TruthDaily.com. With me, Aaron Gleeman of TheAthletic.com. It was especially a fun game in part because the other two games were so depressing. You know, they lost leads on both Wednesday and Tuesday and Wednesday.
In Milwaukee, yeah.
In Milwaukee. That Wednesday game was just weird.
Yeah. And it left them at a disadvantage then for Thursday.
Right. Yep.
Bullpen-wise.
Yes,
Duran was down completely.
Right.
I think they wanted to avoid Thielbar, although he warmed up late.
Yeah.
When Jax was closing it out.
Right.
And they just were very limited.
Like their one long stretch of the season with 9 games in a row, and they started with the first 2 games by just working their bullpen.
Yeah, Baldelli actually
and losing.
talked about that pregame.
Yeah,
because he was like, I think he said to Phil Miller of the Strib, you've asked me so much about the days off and all that, and he basically said, now we're about to start. I think he said like 22 games in 23 days or whatever it is. Yeah. And we got a completely depleted bullpen with the best offense in baseball in the other dugout. Yeah, exactly. So good luck. And Pablo Lopez, who didn't pitch particularly well.
No.
5 runs in 5 innings, I think. 3 homers. And then he said afterward, I completely failed. I feel terrible about this. Yeah. Because not only did he just not pitch well, just on its own, but it was clearly a spot where they would have loved to get 7 from him. Right. And earlier this season, they were in maybe 3-4 weeks ago. I forget the actual opponent, but it was here. And he talked about, he did go like 6 or 7 strong and said before the game, this feels extra good because Rocco kind of came up to me and said, look, we don't have many options behind you here. So if you can kind of be efficient in the first few innings and maybe try to squeeze out an extra few outs here, that would be good. And you could tell he felt bad about it. That's one thing I appreciate about Pablo Lopez. He's always quick to talk about success in terms of the team, but also within that, he's willing to talk about struggles individually. Right. And so when he goes, 7 and gives up a run, it's, the catcher was great calling pitches and the defense was great behind me and the offense gave me some support. When there's a game like last night, he doesn't deflect the individual stuff. And he basically said, complete failure on my part. Right. I'm lucky that the offense decided to show up and did so well. Yeah. And the other kind of weird hero last night was Josh Winder, who has been up and down all season, has not pitched well. There was one other game, though, like this.
Yeah, it was like 5 games ago. Yeah.
Yeah, he went 4 and gave up a run, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
And Rocco was Rocco Baldelli was very full of praise for Winder afterward. And when I was walking, excuse me, through the clubhouse afterward, 3 or 4 different players came up to Josh Winder and gave him a back slap and high five and said basically like, you saved our ass there, which he did. Yeah. Absolutely.
You're absolutely right.
So that they could just turn to only one overworked late inning reliever instead of multiple, or instead of trying to close out the game with who knows what the actual situation, if it would have been kind of a normal, need a 7th, 8th, 9th inning guy, I don't know who that would have even been necessarily. So
Cole Sands had just pitched the day before too. Right?
Yes. And to shut down one of the better lineups, a lineup that just hit 3 homers off Pablo Lopez. And Josh Winder, it's been a struggle for him this year from a health standpoint, from a performance standpoint. He hasn't gotten a ton of chances, obviously, but it's been real up and down, even at AAA. And so, I'm sure that felt real good. And then Ryan Jeffers plays the hero.
Yeah.
Matt Wallner lines like just a rocket off the wall for a single that would have been a homer in all but 2 other parks.
Really?
Or something like that. No, not 2. 8, I don't know, forget. It would have been a homer in most parks. But the
high wall in right field ends up. Yeah.
Then Correa comes through with a clutch double.
Yeah,
in the left center, which was huge.
After leaving guys on second base like 2 times already,
or like 200 times all season.
Right.
And then Ryan Jeffers off the bench. Which here's a funny thing: there's a guy. He's a listener. I don't know his name. I almost don't want to know his name because I'm afraid I'll like Google him and he'll be like some horrendous thing or something. But he sits in front. The section in front of us. And he wears a Miranda Twin Cities jersey.
Okay, all right.
And he's a listener of the show. And it's become a running bit that he's upset that we rip on Ed Julian's defense.
Okay.
And so whenever Ed Julian converts a play at second base, he stands up and he turns around and he points at me and he says, shout something. So the social media team that sits behind me loves it. Like I'm trying to talk them into making him like fan of the week on Instagram.
Sure, right.
But anyway, he was walking past the press box yesterday as Julian was in the on deck circle to face their lefty closer.
Right.
And then they announced Jeffers as the pinch hitter. And he says, oh, boy, Rocco's pinch hitting for my guy Julian. And as he's saying it, Ryan Jeffers launches. He walks away like 3 feet.
Yes.
Ryan Jeffers launches the game-winning home run, 2-run homer.
Yep.
And I turn and I just
watches it the whole way. Does a bat flip that.
He was very excited.
Looks like
about
a pinwheel.
And I turned and I was like, "There you go." I think Jeffers was the only. There were only 2 guys on the bench at that point, Jeffers and Gallo. You're not going to pinch hit Gallo,
versus
for anyone really,
right? But, anyway, right, especially versus the left.
And you could debate. They had just let Wallner hit for himself, obviously.
Right.
You only had the one right-handed option. I think hitting Jeffers for Julian there certainly fits their MO with platooning that we've seen all season. It also is the thing that's frustrated some fans who are like, they just want these young left-handed hitters to hit. I mean, we've talked about this for years and years. Going back to Arise, it was a topic. Going back to the Gardenhire era, it was a topic about like Jock Jones and Kubo and guys like that. There's an overrating of even very good left-handed hitters or even very promising young left-handed hitters like Julian or Wallner. The idea that if you just give them enough reps lefty on lefty, they will develop into productive hitters lefty on lefty. But the reality is even really good, like Joe Mauer or Justin Morneau type of left-handed hitters are just sort of okay against left-handed pitchers. It's the biggest platoon split you can get in any matchup. Right. And so, yes, could you have let Julian hit for himself there? Absolutely. But you have Ryan Jeffers, who's A big, strong right-handed hitter.
Yeah, right.
B, has made a career. The only thing he's really thrived at prior to this year consistently is hitting left-handed pitching. He's got like a career 800-something OPS against him. And he's been your best hitter for like since the All-Star break overall. Right. And here's the fun part. So after he hits the 2-run homer on a real bad slider, I would say.
Yeah, well,
just a hung inside, like I thought it was a bad slider.
It was down low by the time he got to it, but it was
down low when it hit the seats. I think it was in and middle, I would say. But he declined to say it was a bad pitch, obviously, which is not surprising. But here's what he did reveal: an interesting kind of behind the scenes thing. I'm pulling up the actual quote here so I can. So Correa says afterward, post game, here's a quote from Correa. I walked into the cage like between innings and like that, and the pitching machine was super high, like the arm angle of the pitching machine. They have we've talked about this. They have the pitching machine that can mimic deliveries, arm angles, velocity, slider, that sort of thing. And Correa says, I was like, how come the machine is so high? And Jeffers said, I'm going to hit Will Smith's slider, and he's got a high release. He started hitting sliders in the 6th and 7th inning. And then when he came up to bat, I was like, Will Smith is going to throw him a slider, and he's been practicing that slider for 2 innings already. And so
that's funny.
Here's let me try to find.
That's funny because we had a Patreon question about like what do they do when a new pitcher comes in, like, and we're like, they don't really have time to go.
Well,
he was anticipating this two innings beforehand,
which is very interesting to me. I mean, you can map it out, especially that is the one. I don't want to say disadvantage, but of having a left-handed closer is that they're going to pitch the 9th inning. Right. There's not like, when will they bring in this lefty to face our lefties? There's no real matchup to it. Right. And it was going to be a lefty closer either way because their other closing option is Aroldis Chapman, who's also a lefty. And so here's what Jeffers then said. He said, Smith has a high release point, so we jacked the machine way up high. I was just hitting some sliders. I was hitting them pretty well. I told Joey Gallo right before I went out there, hey, if he hangs me one here, I'm putting it in the seats. Now, look, I've been around enough, even in a few years here, to know that when it ends the way it did, some of the blanks to these stories get filled in ways that make them more fun to tell.
Well, he might have said that when he struck out too.
Exactly. Right. But that is a really interesting, strategical component or a behind the scenes component, and that's you definitely see. They have an indoor batting cage with several cages right next to the clubhouse. And there's coaches by it. They hold their team hitting meetings next to it. We're sort of not really allowed to go back there other than in certain circumstances. It's kind of their safe zone for hitters. And there are definitely, I know, like Nelson Cruz used to do this. He would just go, as a DH, he would just go back there and take 50 swings between innings. Right. And Buxton does this and several other players. And so, yeah, you can, when you know it's going to be a left-handed pitcher in the ninth inning, and it's a close game, and you can start to see the bottom of the lineup kind of coming up in that spot. If you're Ryan Jeffers, you can say, well, I'm probably going to pinch hit for somebody here, right? And obviously, if I'm
going to be in the game, it's going to be as a pinch hitter versus a left-handed pitcher.
Yeah,
that's what it's going to be.
What's the downside? I go waste some energy here and don't get called upon in that spot, and I took a few swings in a batting cage, and then I can't have these great quotes. And Correa will go, he just wasted his time. What a loser. That'll be the quote. Like I saw Jeffers, he was working his ass off for no reason. So I thought that was good. I mean, Ryan Jeffers has just been great, and we've talked about it before. It's He's really changed his game in terms of mechanical approach. Parker actually had a good breakdown on Twitter. Just the subtle changes in kind of bat placement and what he's doing with his feet in terms of stride, no stride, leg kick, all that stuff. And then also throwing mechanics have been much better for him. And, it's an odd situation at times now because they paid $10 million a year for 3 years for Christian Vasquez. Although he's been fine since the All-Star break.
He's been better.
If it wasn't for Jeffers having this great run, we'd be going, well, at least Christian Vasquez is showing some signs of life here at the bottom of the lineup. But Jeffers has just made huge contributions for them. And to come off the bench, I think...
Well, especially after... I mean, there was no question in my mind he was not going to get the start today after watching that game on Wednesday where it's 90-some degrees
where he fainted,
or something.
Basically running to first base.
He's just legs are not working, trying to army crawl to first base on a play that any other... I don't know how he managed to get there and be safe. It was just a swinging bunt that ended up being...
He basically fell twice on the way there. And just made it. So, so after that... and Thursday's win. Now, look, I've joked with John, but they're playing the Rangers, who are very good now.
Yes, we can lose 3 in a row easily to the Rangers.
The first 5 minutes of this show might sound absurd 3 days from now, but whatever. That's such is life when you record a podcast. But it's a snapshot in time.
That's exactly
this podcast, among other things.
That's right.
But that win last night was particularly big because like you said. I know people love when I say A, and then I don't finish with a B, C, D, E. I'll try to. Number 2, C.
That was a bit on, what was that show? Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt.
Mad About You.
Mad About You. He'd go, number 2.
I definitely do that. I like lists because it helps my brain type
1,
lay things out.
B.
My brain is kind of like a legal pad at all times. I just need to keep flipping the page of the legal pad. The Milwaukee miniseries was terrible.
Right.
I mean, it was, I'm not going to say it was season ending, obviously, but it was just about the worst case scenario in terms of bullpen usage and the 2 losses and all that. Right. You come home and you lose a 3rd straight there. That's rough. Especially you got 3 more against Texas. The other thing, though, is...
heading into 3 versus Cleveland.
Right. The other thing is Cleveland they finished a suspended game from Wednesday against the Dodgers, and then played a second game yesterday against the Dodgers.
After winning the first game of the series.
Right. Yep. So they lost twice yesterday before the Twins game started.
Right.
And so it was
to 6.
The primest of prime opportunities to just win a game here and then C, or 3, I suppose. And this is something players in Baldelli talked about, is this is just the type of game that you feel really good about winning. Your starting pitcher was not sharp.
Right.
You kind of didn't play well for the first part of the game and even the middle part of the game, but you just kept kind of clawing back, chipping away 1 run here. And there were missed opportunities. I mean, they had opportunities to tie it or take the lead before that and didn't come through.
Right.
And you just go, all right, well, here we go again. But
it doubles off the wall and the guy stays at second base the whole way.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so, but to chip away and then to actually break through, I mean, they've had quite a few 9th inning.
Yeah.
Even some of them have fallen short. Right. Where they're down 4 and they hit 2 homers and they score 3, and then it's like, well, that
happened just last week.
Tim Brewster style moral victory or whatever, where we scored last or whatever. But I don't know. It was a good win, and you wake up this morning, and if you look at Baseball Reference or Fangraphs, they're like roughly 97% now to win the AL Central. I'll just repeat what we've said now for a while, which is now there's 12 games left of this kind of brutal Texas-Cleveland stretch.
Right.
If you can just make it out of this next 12 You've played one of the 12 as we speak right now.
Right.
If you can just kind of make it out alive, and by that I mean with, let's say, a 3-game lead,
Right.
The likelihood of them getting caught from behind, given the schedules involved, with even a 3 or 4 game lead, is so slim that if you can just make it out of this little gauntlet here, and it's going to be tricky. I mean, we saw it last night was a very tricky game, and they got 12 more of these things.
Right. Yes.
And the Cleveland games, obviously,
count twice.
Sort of count double.
Yeah.
But if you can just sort of not face plant, and that's been a tall task for the Twins to not face plant. But the next 12, honestly, going 5 and 7, they'll be in great shape. You could go potentially 4 and 8, depending on when those 4 happen and when those 8 happen. You could potentially go 4 and 8 and come out of it and be 90% to win this thing. And so that's the importance of all these games. Now, they're not must-win games. We're not going to get into that BS at this point. But it's their last sort of test at the high level before you can just kind of coast in. And it's a good test not only of that, but it's a test of really what we've been frustrated by from this team all season, which is they tend to, when facing a situation like this, and when we sit here on a day and say, if they can just build on some momentum, or if they can just get through these next few, and then a week later we tend to go, well, that didn't go well.
Right.
I mean, that was terrible. They completely botched that. And if they can just, for once in their lives, just play competently over these 12, then it changes the entire landscape for the remaining, 3 or 4 weeks of the season.
We had a long conversation on the Patreon about, what this, how we are in the last, 5 weeks of the season here, 6 weeks of the season. And you start paying attention to what kind of team are we going to have at the end of September? Right. And this, it does become sort of a litmus test in that, you faced, Brewers, by the way, are no joke. They're 13 games over 500 or something right now.
They're going to win that division.
I think they're going to win that division.
Especially, by the way, they scored 6 runs off Corbin Burns.
Right. Rangers might be the best team in the American League.
Wow. I would have said that 10 days ago. Yeah.
Right.
Now they've lost 7 in a row.
That's true. And then you've got to prove it versus Cleveland. Right. You've got to go out and win. I mean, you win the draw. You know what I mean? But you're going to have to beat Cleveland.
Yes. Not face plant.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
That's right. I mean, that's the bar here is don't face plant. If you don't face plant over the course of 12 games, and by face plant I mean, go 2 and 4 or worse against Cleveland, and go 4 and 8 or worse overall in these next 12 games. Right. That's really all. I mean, it's not a high bar, but this division is not a high bar. There's not a high bar for this team. I mean, maybe that changes everyone's bar for what success means in the playoffs. Changes obviously.
Well, and part of the reason we had that conversation about what this team looks like end of September is some of the news that broke this week. We talked about it on the Patreon. We'll get to that in a second, but first, let's talk about one of our sponsors here, Hatch. You just started using a Hatch alarm clock.
So Hatch is basically like a new school. I don't know, it's part alarm clock, but it's also like helps you in terms of white noise. It can help you for sleep. It's basically an all-around sleep aid.
It's a dream machine. It's
all
that stuff, right?
I gave it a test. It can be your ally in rest. I like that.
I do too.
It's a sound machine. It's a light and alarm clock. It's nicely designed. So
how big is it?
I would say the size of a cantaloupe.
Okay, all right.
Something like that.
Okay. Is it round?
No, it's like half round with a flat front.
Okay, cool.
But also, I'm sure there are various models and designs and colors that will fit your color scheme. They just sent me one to try, obviously. But it can kind of, teach you, I guess, when it's
your body.
When it's time to get up kind of naturally instead of, no one looks. It's a horrible first 5 seconds of the day when
beep,
you just hear the beep. So the goal is to kind of avoid that, and it can subtly change the light in your room so that it's more like you're waking up in nature if you want that.
That's cool.
Or it can have increasing sounds that start out kind of low, so it's not just hitting you with the full beep beep beep.
And also, as somebody has trouble falling asleep, it does.
Yes, it can do some white noise, which I like to use in my room that blocks out ambient noise and all that. So it really I don't know. It can, if you struggle getting to sleep, staying to sleep, or if you just hate being woken up suddenly by the standard alarm clock.
Right.
It's about right that, I've been using the same alarm clock system for about 40 years. It's about right somebody invented something that was like, here's a better way to do this, because it's not the greatest way to do it. Right. So Hatch is offering our listeners $20 off your purchase of a Hatch Restore, and you also get free shipping. It's hatch.co, not com, co. So right. Hatch, Hatch, hatch.co/Gleeman.
That's right.
Sleep deeply, wake gently with the Restore. Go to hatch.co/Gleeman to get $20 off, and you will get free shipping. That's hatch.co/Gleeman.
And it's going to be, we're 2 weeks away from opening day of the football season?
I can tell it's football season because none of the television news people were at the Twins game. Usually the first game of a homestand.
Yeah, that's true.
I see my boys Doogie Wolfson, and Jim Rich, and whoever else, Mike Max. And it was nice and empty in Rocco's pregame, which is just how I like it. I'd prefer no one in there.
You want to monopolize Rocco as much as you can.
Because here's the truth. When there's no one there, we can ask real dumb questions.
And this year, you're going to win your fantasy football league. That's your new guy. I don't mean you, Eric. I mean, you're not going to win your fantasy football league.
But you can use RotoWire to really help. They're the best. I mean, they provide player news.
20 years they've been doing this.
To all the big sites.
Years, maybe.
I use it just for baseball writing because their player database.
Right.
You can go look back through a player's entire injury history, their entire call-up career, whatever you want. And here's what they're offering our listeners, a totally free trial. And I know you hear that a lot, but they don't even ask for your credit card here.
Right.
It's not like, 7 days in, they're going to start charging you.
Right.
They're so confident in their product that they're saying basically you can get a free trial. You can use this free trial to draft all of your leagues if you want.
That's
for free.
Yeah. And their cheat sheets are updated daily.
Yes.
It's going to be one of those things like,
customizable.
as soon as news breaks that, such and such wide receivers got a strained hamstring, is going to miss the first 3 games. Those adjustments are being made on their projected stats.
As someone who used to produce written fantasy magazines, do not rely on the magazine that you bought off the shelf from somewhere, because those magazines were submitted 3 months ago.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So here's how it works. You just go to rotowire.com/Gleeman. No credit card required. Totally free trial. Use it to draft with, and then just assess. Do I like this product? They're confident you will. That's rotowire.com/Gleeman. All right. I don't know. There's a few ways we could go here. I guess we can talk about the rotation a little bit. They haven't announced fully, what it's going to be, but similar to, I guess on last week's show, I kind of hinted at coming Buxton changes,
which we'll talk
coming
about.
Julian changes. Right. Sometimes we know stuff. I would guess, as of right now, some of this has been announced, some of it hasn't, but I'm going to guess that Joe Ryan returns to the rotation on Saturday against the Rangers. Bailey Ober pitches Sunday against the Rangers, and then my assumption is that instead of going to the 6-man rotation that we've talked about, what they're going to do is keep a 5-man rotation, but have Dallas Keuchel, what they call piggyback,
with Bailey
Ober on Sunday. Now,
like
that could change depending on what happens over the next couple of days.
Sure.
And it could also change based on how Bailey Ober's own start goes. Yeah. I mean, if he struggles or if he's flawless or somewhere in between, that could change things. But I think that is their way to kind of go. It's almost like a 5.5-man rotation, I guess you might look at it. To keep Keuchel in the mix, they could potentially then the next time through if they wanted, depending on the off days. By the way, depending on how big this lead gets or stays against Cleveland, expand it to a true 6-man. But right now, I think they're still in, let's keep everyone on schedule. Let's try to still pedal to the metal here, expand or maintain this lead, and it keeps Dallas Keuchel around. It's a weird situation with Keuchel because prior to his last start against Pittsburgh, I felt like this was probably going to be his last start with the Twins because Joe Ryan had made a rehab start and was ready.
Potentially his last start ever.
Well, and that's the extra weird part is like it's one thing to say, well, the Twins have gotten what they need to get out of him, which is 3 starts, regardless of how he pitches. Joe Ryan's ready to step back in, but then he goes out there and he takes a perfect game into the 7th. And I think it can be a mistake to overreact to one game like that, particularly because it's not like he had 15 strikeouts or something, but he did pitch well. Right, yeah. Now, Pittsburgh's a weak-ish lineup,
exactly
but whatever. Yeah. In his first start, he allowed 1 run in 5 innings. Yep. It wasn't the prettiest. Yep. Right. Obviously, the second one in Philly was a disastrous start. But it's very difficult to, after a guy takes a perfect game into the 7th, to literally say to him the next day or 2 days later,
Thank you.
Thanks, see ya. Particularly because, as you just said, his last start with the Twins, that could, if that were the case, could very easily become his last start, period, the last start of his career. I mean, this is a comeback.
It's also, besides, sort of the unfairness of it all, there's also the aspect of, all the other guys in that locker room want to know that results matter a little bit.
Sure. Right? Well, and there's definitely, I would say Keuchel definitely kind of commands a room, just seeing him a few times here. Right. And it's different than if even like a Jay Happ or somebody, another veteran. Sure. But, they command a room in the sense that people go, oh, this guy's been pitching for 15 years. Dallas Keuchel comes with a lot of bona fides.
Right. That's right. And, you could maybe argue they might react to that, to a veteran. You're, cutting loose a veteran pitcher if he has a bad start there. Like, maybe you give him more than 2 bad starts in a row. Instead, he goes with pitches 5 2/3 of no, and
6 1/3.
I'm sorry, 6 1/3 no.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, right.
6 1/3 perfect. Yeah. So now, you're not under any obligation.
Sure,
but.
Also, wouldn't you want to have that guy available, maybe?
Right. That's kind of my feeling on it.
The idea of piggybacking with Ober is an interesting one, too. You've got the righty versus the lefty. Right. You've got kind of a hard.
And we talked on Monday's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We talked because that was immediately after
Sunday's
ugly game. With
Sunday's game was the one Keuchel. Was the Keuchel game?
Oh, then we talked on Wednesday.
We talked on Wednesday about Ober.
We talked on Wednesday after Tuesday's ugly game.
After 84 pitches, right? Yeah.
And clearly they're trying to. They've said as much going back a few weeks, but they're trying to limit Bailey Ober's workload because Bailey Ober is already like 20 innings past his career high in any season as a professional, and is it a big deal to finish with 165 innings in a season? No, not usually. But when you've only ever thrown 108, it's a big deal. And it's not a big deal in the sense that they think his arm's going to disintegrate on the mound. But it does you no good to have Bailey Ober throw 165 innings, 60 more than he's ever thrown before, if you get to the playoffs and you say, boy, he just hasn't looked like himself the last 3 weeks. We don't trust him for a playoff start. Well, then that's a failure because you didn't need every ounce of him to win the division, but you might need every ounce of him in the playoffs. Right. And so you get into some spots where I think we discussed this.
They're trying to manage this.
Right. And I think everyone can agree, or most everyone can agree, it's logical, given his track record, given where they are in the division and all that stuff, to say, we're not going to bump him from the rotation. We're not going to do a Strasburg shutdown. By the way, Strasburg yesterday announced he's retired, 33 or whatever he is. Right. But what we're going to do is, I think Baldelli phrased it as, we're going to try to find subtle ways to limit his workload. And what that means is, when they can give him an extra day between starts because of the schedule, they'll do it. If they can,
Tuesday's start, he had 2 extra days already.
Right. If they can push him to the back of the rotation and keep everyone else on schedule, they might do that. Right. And then the real thing that's very obvious to see is starts like Tuesday, where he gets through 5 and he's at 80 pitches or whatever it was. Yep. And instead of saying, we'd normally ask him to pitch the 6th and go towards 100 pitches, but no, what is that inning? Why is that inning important? Right. And if you do that 5 times from here to then, it's like taking away a start, essentially. And there's no, it's not a box you can check and know something's going to be good or bad. It's just what can we do, kind of subtle ways. Now, I think
Dylan Flora comes in and gives him 5 runs.
That's the thing. Everyone, I think, if you lay that out, can say, all right, that makes sense. But that's in theory. In practice, somebody then has to pitch that 6th inning. And as you said, when Dylan Flora comes in and gives up 400 consecutive singles, then it's like, well, they should have kept Ober in.
Right.
They maybe.
Should have. No, they should have.
But you need to be able to count on someone being able to pitch a 6th inning somewhat effectively. Now, that's a whole other issue with their bullpen because it's kind of running on fumes at this point. Right. But I don't know. The goal is not just for the playoffs this year, but you're hoping to have Bailey Ober in your rotation for like 4 more years. Yes. And so I think that all makes sense. And I think keeping Keuchel around makes doing that. There are more possibilities to limit Bailey Ober's workload. Right. There are also more possibilities if one of the starting pitchers get hurt or struggle. Now
we don't know what Joe Ryan's situation is exactly right now. We're going to see him on Saturday. He did have a rehab start last Friday after we did the last free podcast. Went 4 innings, gave up 1 hit, and it was a home run.
He says he feels good. He was there. He was there yesterday. But now Louis Varland could provide that same thing. I personally would kind of like to see Louis Varland as a reliever, like a true reliever. I don't know. They've been given. I thought that like 3 days ago, but they've been given some interesting, weird signs about that. But we'll see. I mean, a lot of this stuff is kind of building towards September 1st, when they can add 2 more players. Now, we should note for most of my life, and I think even most of your life, I don't know what they did in the 1800s.
I
but
don't either.
September roster expansion meant anyone on the 40-man roster could be called up.
Right.
So most times teams didn't call up 40 dudes, but you've got a lot of 33 guys, 35 guys. Yeah. Some teams did call up 40 guys, and it made for really weird baseball in September when teams are fighting for playoff spots, and some teams have 15 relievers and 5 pinch runners and all this stuff. It made for really weird. And so starting in 2020, when they expanded the active roster from 25 to 26, they also said September roster expansion will go from 26 to 28, not to 40. Right. And so you can only add 2 guys. And so
that's part of the collective bargaining agreement. The players got an extra person added to the roster, so they ended up, having that many more salaries, a full year worth of salary amongst 30 teams, but they had to give up the call up, the September call up, unlimited September call ups.
Right. So. Now, on one hand, it was fun to see just a bunch of prospects in the dugout, and you might get a pinch hit play or whatever. But for the most part, I think this actually makes for a better product on the field. Just it never made sense to me that the most important games of the season are played with double the bench as all the other games. It was like it should be in reverse,
especially from a bullpen situation standpoint. But as a result of that kind of hurts the Twins this year because they've got at least 2 guys hopefully coming off the IL, maybe 3.
I know people are like, here are 10 prospects that the Twins should call up for September. None of those guys are going to get called up because I'm not even sure Louis Varland's going to get called up because here's the thing. Willie Castro's about to start a rehab assignment with the Saints. Okay. Now, what complicates that is his wife is like going to give birth any minute now. So he's going to go on this rehab assignment for his oblique injury. Right. And then he's going to go on paternity leave at some point for a few days when his wife has the child. Yeah. And so you're almost going to have to
that's not a bad way to kind of give him give the oblique a little start and then
sure, but then he's going to have to come back and then resume the rehab, I'm sure. So that's going to probably be a September edition. Right. They're hoping to get Buxton back at some point in September. They're hoping to get Kirilloff back at some point in September. Well, that's already 3 guys. There's only 2 spots. Right. And that's without talking about Varland. That's without even getting into Austin Martin, let alone, pipe dreams of Brooks Lee or anything like that. So I think, it used to just be call up everyone. This will all just be a big roster. And now it's more about functionality and the actual roles that they can serve. And in this case, just getting everyone healthy. Because here's the thing. And I'm not even counting Larnach or Nick Gordon or Miranda or anybody like that. They have legitimately, if those 3 guys I just mentioned, Castro, Buxton, Kirilloff, are healthy, and everyone currently healthy stays healthy. Now, that's unlikely. But they would have 16 hitters that I think would want on a roster, like on a playoff roster type of thing. Well, even with a 28-man roster in September, you're not going to have 16 hitters. You could maybe have 15 and 13 pitchers, which they've had. But even then, somebody's going to go. Now, somebody out of that 3 won't come back, or somebody out of the other 13 will get hurt. So it'll solve itself. But that's what to expect for September. If you're thinking, well, here's 4 good performing pitchers at AAA who deserve it. Don't hold your breath on that. I mean, it's just not feasible.
And if they do end up saying like, okay, we're moving Varland to the bullpen, something like that, they can find another arm in the bullpen to send down.
Well, that's point, also part of the Keuchel thing is it the best use of a roster spot in September?
To have a 5th and a half pitcher?
Right now, to have a 35-year-old with no future value to you who's like, your 6th starter basically and piggyback, that. Not really. I don't know. I'm a skeptic with Keuchel even after watching his good last start. But what have they really been using the last couple of spots in the bullpen for? I mean, we joked on the Patreon. I did the math with the help of Do-Young Park. Cole Sands, as of 2 days ago, had spent 65 days on the active Major League roster this season, and he had pitched 14 innings in 65 days. He had appeared 11 times. So he pitched once a week, basically. Well, that's a roster spot that's essentially not being used. And then even, some other, the Balazovic Ortega spot that basically, like you can make better use of these, or at least you can stash a different non-used player in that spot without really impacting things. Because this goes back to the Molitor days, but it's certainly true of the bullpen now. Everyone likes to think that, well, if you have eight-man bullpen or even a 9-man bullpen in September, there's no way they'll get overused. But the number of guys in the bullpen isn't what affects overusage. Right. It's the number of trustworthy guys in the bullpen. That's right. And so we're seeing that now, which is they have had 8 guys in the bullpen the entire season. And I wrote the other day that, the Duran Jax contingent is overworked. And people were like, how can they be overworked? The Twins starting pitchers have thrown the second most innings in baseball. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's only
the offense doesn't score any runs, so it's always a close game.
Exactly.
Right.
That it's never a blowout. Right. And they only trust, really, at this point, Duran, Jax, Pagan, and Thielbar.
Right.
And so we saw in Milwaukee.
Justifiably, by the way.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying they should trust anybody else. I don't even fully trust Pagan, so they're doing more than me at that point. But we saw the last Milwaukee game, which is they had to use all their guys, and they used Duran for 2 innings because it was a close game. And then what happens? Well, going into the last night's game against the Rangers, the whole bullpen was down, basically. That's that's the problem with only having 4 guys.
Winder comes in and throws 3.
And so that's you can have endless relievers. And we used to joke around with Molitor about this because Molitor would really only trust like 2 guys or 3 guys. Right. And he would just use, like at one point, like Trevor Hildenberger would just get used 30 times in 45 games. Right. And then his arm would fall off. Right. And it was like, well, why'd they use him like that? They have 8 relievers. Well, he only trusted 2 of them. So anytime there was a close game, those are the guys that are getting in it. And my fear is that's kind of where they're at. Now, they're past the point of being able to really do something about that. I mean, the trade deadline has come and gone. We ripped them pretty decently, I think, for not making bullpen moves at the trade deadline. I certainly think whatever you viewed the bullpen as on August 1st, it's less promising right now. Right. I mean, Brock Stewart's been all but ruled out for the season. Balazovic's been demoted, although he just got called back. Moran has been demoted. Jackson, Duran are starting to show some signs of wearing down maybe a little bit. It's not a good bullpen. It's not a deep bullpen.
Pagan and Thielbar both managed to cough up a lead earlier this week, right?
But I mean, they're relying an awful lot on those 4 that I mentioned, and they're going to need someone like Floro to be a 5th because you just can't. You're not going to be able to make it 6 weeks. So that is why I'm starting to wonder about Varland. And then if we get into the playoffs, starting to wonder about Maeda potentially moving to the bullpen. Sure. So that's why that comes into play. I don't know. The bullpen.
Listen, if they don't come back and win that game yesterday, the story of this week is the bullpen pulling leads. Right. I mean, that happens both times in Milwaukee. Both times in the 6th and 7th inning. It's not the 8th and the 9th inning where they do end up losing in the 10th inning. Don't get me wrong when Duran's in his second. But I mean, that's, with the Manfred Ghost Runner, that's going to happen. But the truth is that both of those games were lost in the, second tier of their bullpen, which is, to be honest, to be fair, Thielbar and Pagan have actually been pretty good since the All-Star break. They've probably been their 2 best relievers since the All-Star break. So them losing that lead on Wednesday, it's just unfortunate. There's nothing to be learned from it necessarily. But the fact is that is the area that we were worried about. That was the area that we kind of thought, listen, we can't believe they're not going to go out and they don't need to go get Josh Hader. They needed to go get, somebody a little better than Dylan Floro. Right.
And so there's 2 components of it that I think warrant, worry or concern or criticism, which one is what you just pointed out, which is you can point to specific innings and specific losses and go, they just didn't have the options here. Right. Yeah. That's one thing. But I'm almost more bigger picture. It's like even when they do, they have a 4-2 lead after 6, and you can map out how you want it. But even if it goes Pagan, Jax, Duran, and even if they pitch clean innings and you win that game, two of those guys aren't going to be available the next day probably.
Right,
and if Duran does have to go 2 like he did in Milwaukee, then might be out for 2 days at that point. And I'm not criticizing that part. The guys should be rested because what we've also seen is, Jax's rough stretches here have followed some pretty heavy usage. Duran's rough stretch followed right out of the All-Star break, the heaviest usage of his entire career probably. And so, is there a 1-for-1 correlation there? No, but you can point to specific games that are won or lost because of bullpen depth or bullpen quality. That's one thing. But then you can also point to kind of the aftermath of, even if it goes cleanly, when you only have 3 or 4 guys that you trust, most games that you win, you're going to end up using 3 good three of your good relievers.
That's exactly right.
And then what happens the next day? Maybe you use those same guys, but then the third day you can't use them. And then that's kind of the part of it that I'd be focused on now is just they just don't have like I would argue a 4th, but they don't have like a 5th and 6th option that on a B squad day they can still count on to get a 7th inning, 3 outs or whatever. And that they need Floro to step up. They were hoping Balazovic would step up. I mean, he's going to get another chance. It was very funny. He was back in the clubhouse yesterday unpacking his stuff, and I won't say who, but a writer was like, "What are you doing here?" He was like, "I got called back up," and they were like, "Didn't you just get sent down?" He was like, "Yeah." So he got sent down. Never even pitched.
Poor Jody plays
for St. Paul, and then Oliver Ortega, who was replaced him, left the game with a back injury, went right back on the IL. So the way it works is normally when you send a pitcher down, they're ineligible to return for 15 days.
Right.
It's to stop kind
injury.
of the churn and burn of a bullpen that we saw in years past, unless it's an injury. If there's an injury, that wipes away the whole time limit thing or day limit.
It's a loophole.
So you can bring a guy back. We saw that with Jose Miranda last year. They sent Jose Miranda in what is now called the Jose Miranda phantom demotion. They sent Jose Miranda down to make room for Royce Lewis in like May of last year. I want to say it was in the middle of the season,
June,
early mid season. And then Lewis got hurt in his first game, and then they immediately, I think this is the transaction tree there, and then they immediately called Miranda back. He never even got to St. Paul. Like he was still in the 48-hour window you get to report after a demotion. They brought him right back, and then he was their best hitter for the next 3 months. So, they're hoping that happens with Balazovic. They were clearly counting on not just Balazovic, Dylan Floro. Before that, the way they got Dylan Floro was Jorge Lopez. They were counting on Lopez being a dependable guy. That didn't really work out. They were also kind of counting on Jorge Alcala being a dependable guy, and he's just been AWOL now for 2 seasons because of injuries. So they're just in a spot where you got 2 or 3 out of 8 spots in a bullpen are just kind of low leverage, mop up, long relief, now including Keuchel. And you have 4 guys you trust who are just going to be ridden into the ground because they can't stop playing low-scoring games.
Well, and this is why those series versus Cleveland, despite the fact that you're saying just don't plant yourself, there is an advantage to taking 4 out of 6 in there. You want this division to end as early as possible.
If they take 4 out of 6, it'll be over.
They need to. I agree.
If the Twins take 4 out of 6,
that's what I'm saying. At that point, you can start thinking about what is Bailey Ober's role going to be in the? Is it going to be in the rotation, or is it going to be?
You can also start thinking, what's the best plan for a 100% Johan Duran on game 1 of a postseason?
Yeah,
is it giving him a week off?
Right.
Is it having him pitch every 3rd day? Right. Is it what is it? You can Griffin Jack, same thing. You can start to map that out because then. If you can get into September and you're up like 6 or 7 games with 18 to play or something like that, well, then guess what? You can hold auditions for playoff bullpen spots. You can say to Louis Varlin or Jordan Balazovic or Dylan Floro or whatever, put together 5 good outings here. Convince us that you're someone who could pitch in a playoff game. Because, best laid plans for playoffs, you like to think, we only need 3 relievers. Right. And then Cody Stashak's the first guy out of the bullpen at Yankee Stadium, and you go, that's right, we needed more than that. Let's see, there was one other pitching thing, then we'll talk. Sonny Gray, who I think pitches tonight, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, pitches tonight. We've talked about this for 2 seasons now, but certainly this season, this notion, Gray has, I think, through his veteran status, through how well he pitched early in the season, and through the way he talks post-game about himself and his hatred of being removed from games under any circumstances. Right. There's this narrative that got built up, and I don't think he intentionally did this. It's just the way he is.
Right.
And it also kind of...
I think he does it partly to kind of psych himself up. Like, I want to be in there. I want to be in the game.
Absolutely.
I want to... Right. That's his focus. His focus is to be a workhorse. He wants to become a workhorse. The problem is he's never really been a workhorse.
Yeah, he's never been a workhorse. Right. Go look at his entire track record. He's been a lot of things. Multi-time All-Star, really good pitcher. Right. A number 2 starter, but a workhorse he ain't.
No. Just never.
That's his mentality. It's not his physicality necessarily. But it also then kind of connected to the uproar last season about Baldelli's quote-unquote quick hooks. And so it was, how dare they keep taking this veteran workhorse grinder Sonny Gray out after 5 or 6 innings.
Kevin Brown is
whatever. And then, what is unsaid is Sonny Gray, after every start, probably since Little League, was like, I think I got removed too early. And what's also unsaid, especially this season, it was sort of true last season too, third time through the order, I remember. But especially this season, through 5 innings, he has a, let's see, I wrote down the actual, 2.43 ERA. That's phenomenal. We saw it in his last start.
Yep.
He cruised through 5 perfect on 47 pitches. And you're thinking, he might go 9. He might just.
Right.
And then, 4 outs later, he's leaving the game and he's allowed 4 runs.
That's right,
And from the 6th inning on this season, he has a 7.65 ERA. Now, narratively, that's very convenient.
Sure.
It's overblown in terms of how he actually pitches over the course of his career. But Sonny Gray, like almost every starting pitcher, gets worse with each subsequent time they face the same batter in the same game. It's the pitcher loses their advantage when the batter sees them more. Right. They get to get a fuller scouting report. There's just visual cues that help your brain, and then also you just see the same pitches. There's only so many different plans of attack the pitcher can have before the batter goes, well, now I can just play along. I can think along with him. I've seen the slider. I've seen the curveball. I know he likes to start me out with a first pitch fastball or whatever it is. And so Sonny Gray, like most pitchers throughout their career, the 3rd time through the lineup, which is usually the 5th inning, roughly, is the decision point. And managers tend to take those pitchers out. And then I think, though, the tide seems to have almost turned to the point now people are frustrated by Sonny Gray's inability.
I feel that's right.
And I would like to find some middle ground here, as usual, where it's like there's no moral failing on the part of anyone here. Like they're both doing their job. I have no problem with a pitcher, Sonny Gray, whoever, saying, I'd like to stay in. I'd like to stay in the fight. He likes to. I once sat in a room as Sonny Gray repeated, I want to stay in the fight. I would say 60 times in 4 minutes. He wants to stay in the fight, believe me.
It's more like 60 times in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Just sort of saying.
Well, it was a long. You're right about that. It was a long. Yeah. But I have no problem with, as Baldelli says about a lot of decisions, we're trying to win the game.
Right. Yeah. Right.
We're not trying to build Sonny Gray's baseball reference page here. You know what I mean? And so I hope at some point a middle ground can be found, because I think this is a prime example of trying to think along with a team's thought process. In 2023, the way starting pitchers are handled, modern baseball, not always saying, what would Jack Morris do 30-something years ago? Right. And I think this is just a perfect example of the manager or the pitching coach, whatever, in this case, they're on high alert once a pitcher like Sonny Gray gets through the 5th inning. No matter where they've thrown perfect on 47 pitches or they've danced around 5 walks or whatever it is. And the idea that, well, we might remove this pitcher at 80 pitches through 5, even though, he could go 100 pitches and throw one more. It's the same with Bailey Ober. Yeah. And then the flip side is, no one should have any problem with the pitcher wanting to stay in. Of course, the pitcher. You don't want a pitcher saying, I wish they would have taken me out earlier. That would have been great. Would have helped my ERA. That's not what you want to hear either. And I do think I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, because people are nuts, especially on Twitter and comment sections and stuff like that. But I don't know why it has to be an either or. Like, why does someone have to be mad at one part of this, is what I'm saying. Why does it have to be mad at Baldelli for the quick hooks? And then all of a sudden, once it's kind of shown that those quick hooks for Gray, not quick hooks, but, I would say normal hooks for Gray are very justified by his own performance, then everyone just kind of goes over and takes the pitchforks over to the other side and goes, well, now we're mad at Gray. Why does it have to be either? He's a good pitcher who, like many
because what they
good
want,
pitchers,
what they want is somebody who's going to go 7 innings.
Of
That's
course.
what they want, right?
Well, yeah. So do the Twins, believe me.
Right, yeah, right. So does Sonny Gray.
But wishful thinking,
right?
Put that in, what is it? Put that in one hand and then defecate in the other hand. See which one fills up first. I'd change that for radio, but that's a good saying.
Something like that.
See which one fills up first. I probably botched that, but you get the premise, hopefully, or not. In which case, I sound like a maniac. But saying to yourself, "Well, we'd really like if Sonny Gray just consistently went 7." Well, yeah. So what if you really like that? You can lose a division trying to wait for that to happen. And so I don't know. It's playing out in such a perfect way that if you are somewhat open-minded to what you're seeing and sort of passing judgment based on what you're seeing and the evidence, as opposed to just being mad that not everyone's Jack Morris or whatever. I think it's a perfect example of a team trying to do what's best for them, which is we have a really good starting pitcher here, but when he gets to 80 pitches or a third time through the lineup, he's no longer a really good starting pitcher. Right. He's not a bad pitcher. I mean, I think the 7 ERA overstates it, but
he was an all-star last year.
He was an all-star
this year,
a month ago. Yeah. But once you get to third time through a lineup, 5th inning or whatever, we're going to kind of take it on a batter by batter, case by case basis. Right. And then the flip side is in Sonny Gray, you don't have to act like he's a bum because he can't go 7. Right. Not all pitchers can go 7, especially right now. So I don't know. And this goes back to the Ober thing we were talking about, the Maeda stuff we were talking about. It does you also, within that, it does you no good for Sonny Gray to set a career high in innings or whatever, or to finish 3rd in the Cy Young voting. I mean, that's great if that happens. But it needs to be in the process of the larger goal, which is Sonny Gray's going to
some noise in the postseason.
Well, yeah, Sonny Gray's probably going to start like game 2 of a playoff series or game 1, if for that matter. It doesn't do us any good if he throws 180 innings and we leave him in for the 6th and the 7th down the stretch, and he's really happy about that. And then he gets to the playoffs and he's 80% and he gives up 4 runs in 3 innings. And then what good did that do you? And so as they hopefully avoid face planting here over these next 12 games, what we've talked about a lot is, the priorities on opening day are different than the priorities in July and the priorities in September and certainly the priorities in October. And the Twins are in a fortunate position through some of their own doing, but really because the division is such horse bleep, that the pendulum can swing a little bit to the other side, which is how do we cross this regular season finish line in a way that we can then immediately start a more important race.
You can sacrifice some of the upside to moderate your risk. Right, to manage your risk. Let's talk last about our last 2 sponsors. First of all, Stamps.com. Nobody wakes up and says, "Oh, I get to go to the post office today."
No.
Awesome.
Postal workers don't even say that. More than anybody, probably they don't.
Probably not. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Stamps.com. I was a power user for like a whole 6-month period of Stamps.com when I was sending out autographed copies of my book. The beauty of Stamps.com is you just print off the shipping, not only labels, but the postage. Right. You can, save money that way because you can have precise, measuring. You don't have to just buy 6 stamps and slap them on there. You then also, as you point out.
Or just guess.
You can weigh it, and then you can track your packages. They'll give you like a barcode and a number, and you can actually tell when your packages are getting delivered, which was key for me. And then, as you said, the big upside is you just drop them in a mailbox or give them to your letter carrier, whatever it is. You don't have to go stand in line with 5 packages every day at the post office.
Exactly.
And so Stamps.com, I can vouch for them as a very good product, and they're offering.
You can get your business ready for the holiday rush. Get started with Stamps.com today. You sign up with the promo code GEEK. Geek, not Gleeman. Yeah. Usually we do Geek.
Geek. Geek.
Yeah. For a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. You just go to Stamps.com. You'll see a microphone at the top of the page, and you enter the code GEEK. And that's how you're going to get all that bounty from Stamps.com.
And then last but not least, the Game Time app, which, you're probably going to want to go to Target Field a fair amount here down the stretch in September.
That's right.
Weather's good. Teams are...
Cleveland's coming to town.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you might want to be there late to maybe see a division get clinched, something like that.
That's right.
You can use the Game Time app. Their specialty is hard to find tickets, and that's not just sporting events. That's like concerts, shows, all that stuff, and then also last-minute tickets, which is very useful for Twins games.
Exactly right.
John has been spotted many a time, like on his way, walking towards Target Field, looking at his phone, and he's buying the tickets.
That is correct.
You can almost do it like seamlessly. You just buy them and then just walk right through the gate with them.
That's exactly what I do.
And that's the Game Time app that you can use. And here's the deal that they have for Gleeman and the Geek listeners.
You just download the Game Time app. You create an account and you use the code Gleeman for $20 off your first purchase. So this is an app, not just a website. So you're going to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Gleeman for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, let's talk hitting now. So much pitching for this team because the hitting has been their strength now since the All-Star break.
That's right.
I think games like last night are proof positive. Those are not games they win in the first half. When they lost plenty of games getting great pitching performances in the first half. They didn't win many games not getting great pitching in the first half. And last night was an example, as Pablo Lopez talked about after the game.
It feels like the ball is flying out of the stadiums a lot.
Yeah.
Both at Target Field, we saw, I think, at AmFam Stadium now it's called.
There is some truth
Milwaukee.
to that.
Yeah, right.
Home run rates and stuff rise with the temperatures
Absolutely.
and everything. But I'm not smart enough to know why that is, but it is.
As things warm up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. A couple things within the lineup. I mentioned Willie Castro starting to rehab with the Saints, but he's got the paternity aspect mixed in there, so that might be a little bit of a delay. Buxton, let's see, was it the first game of the Pirates series?
Yes.
We talked to Buxton, in good spirits. Hamstring's feeling a lot better. He's been pregame. I've seen him a couple times playing catch, doing some running, taking some fly balls, that sort of thing. Not real heavy lifting, but the sort of stuff that guys begin to do when they're on the road to coming back. And he was in good spirits, said that the hamstring feels good, but then beyond that, at that point, 3 weeks that he had sat out, his knee was feeling a lot better. His hip was feeling a lot better. And within that,
nature is healing.
Yeah. It turns out not playing a sport for several weeks makes your body feel better. Right. Although I've not played a sport for like 25 years and I still feel like garbage. So I don't know the math on that. But I've been having hip problems lately.
You have been having
hip
problems. Okay.
Like starting to worry me a little bit, but because it's not going away.
Okay.
And Baldelli, after we talked to Buxton 4 days ago or 5 days ago, then we talked to Baldelli about what we had talked to Buxton about, and I'll get into that in a second with him in terms of him playing center field. And then Baldelli started talking about Buxton's legs and his knee and his hip and how they're all kind of tied together with the back and all this stuff. And he starts to kind of point to his hip and say, this happens and that happens. And I just, about 30 seconds earlier, forced Do-Hyung Park to listen to the identical thing about my own hip that I'm sure he was not interested in. Right. And as Baldelli say this, I'm looking at Do like, see? Two great athletes affected by rough hip situations, to the point that Do just then pointed at me and was like, Gleeman, it's just never mind. And Baldelli's like, what's going on? Oh, this fat piece of S has a bad hip. Also shocking. He didn't say that. That was my internal monologue. But with Buxton, the end goal here, or the next steps here, he ain't coming back without a rehab this time.
Right. Yeah.
Same with Kirilloff, who we'll get to in a minute. Also, we talked to him too. Talked to him twice now since the last 5 days or whatever. The days of bringing Kepler and Buxton back without a rehab, they've been burned too many times with that. Yeah. And also, Buxton's going to have been out for 40 days at some point.
Well, and also we are, like we say, we've got 6 with 34 to play here.
True.
It's not necessarily an all hands on deck situation.
Especially
right now,
as we just went through the roster logjam.
Right.
There's no reason to bring a guy back and have to bump someone from the roster if that guy's not ready to go, basically. Yeah. Right. But the Buxton situation is he's feeling better. He's not feeling perfect, but he's feeling better. He's got to get over the hamstring completely, but he's nearing the end stages of that, I think. He's going to go out on a rehab assignment, and Baldelli, his exact words were, we're having an actual conversation now about him potentially playing center field when he returns.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean he's a starting center fielder.
Right.
That means instead of being an everyday DH, which
he's not necessarily an everyday DH.
Right.
Right, exactly.
Now, that could cut both ways. I mean, you could bring him back as a not everyday DH and not involve center field. That just means he's a part-time DH,
right.
although that's a tough sell on a log-jammed roster, too.
Right.
And I think it could be somewhat confusing. I know people are just confused about all injury situations, especially with Buxton in general, but like, why now? Why is this different? Well, I have 3 reasons.
End game.
Right. I mean, why now versus April, May, June, whatever? 3 reasons. 1, the time off has made him feel as recovered as he's felt at any point since spring training.
Right.
So
let's not forget that they were absolutely grinding to try to get him and Kirilloff and Polanco in shape for opening day. Right. And the only one that made it back in time was Buxton.
As a DH.
Right. Yeah. And that was as a DH. Right.
So as he said, and Baldelli, more specifically said, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. And that's partly schedule because there's only 5 weeks, 6 weeks left. But it's also just he's had time off. Like his legs have been not being used for several weeks. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. The second part of it is the idea of Buxton as your full-time DH has lost a lot of luster, in part because I'm on part 2A. I can't do this anymore. It's like a legal document. I'm caught myself with these.
Point 1.3.
Yeah. Please refer to document 4, section 3. Anyway, he hasn't been particularly productive as a full-time DH. It really hasn't even allowed him to stay fully healthy, obviously. I mean, it did for a few months, but now he's been on the IL twice in the last whatever. And especially, you're no longer lacking in DH options. You got Julian, you got Wallner, you got Jeffers. You could potentially have other guys in that spot too. They've gotten good production by cycling those guys through, and by using Julian there allows them to play Royce Lewis at third and Polanco at second, where otherwise you might not have a spot for them. And so the appeal of Buxton, in that it's just, he's our DH. You're now blocking. Right. At the beginning of the season, he was blocking like Trevor Larnach. Well, now he's blocking guys who've been performing now for months.
Yeah, guys that you don't want to leave the lineup.
And so that loses a little luster. And then the other part is just time, which is what is the real end goal here? And this is what we just talked about with the pendulum of kind of focus swinging, which is we'd really kind of like Byron Buxton to be in center field for game 1 of a playoff game. That would help. Not only because he'd be replacing a weaker bat, although Michael A. Taylor's got about 1 billion home runs this month. But you want Julian in the DH spot for a playoff game, presuming you're facing a righty and all that. So those are the reasons for it. But all those reasons, I think, are individually logical and taken together are logical. But none of them guarantee anything. Right. And Baldelli especially has been very cautious in his wording of saying I can't go back to this. It would be occasional usage in center field. We're not looking to bring him back as your 5-day-a-week center fielder. That's just not even a possibility. And even that, he's unwilling to say that's even likely. Because, for that to happen, he's going to have to do at least probably another week of behind-the-scenes work. Then he's going to have to go either Fort Myers to start or directly to St. Paul and do a rehab assignment, which is going to be he's going to DH, then he's going to take a day off, then he's going to DH, then he's going to play center field, then he's going to take a day off. It's going to be they need him to play center, not because they think he's going to forget how to play center field, but because they need to find out what does he look like the next morning when he walks in after he plays 7 innings in center field.
When they said Buxton can't play outfield right now, what they weren't saying he literally can't go out and field fly balls. They're saying his body isn't holding up to the rigors of
what
playing
happens
the outfield,
next day.
Now we're talking end game situation here, and in the especially if you get it to the postseason where there's granted, you've got to get through that first series and stuff, but there's a lot of days off in the postseason. There's a lot of times where it's a 2-game set. Now it's a 3-game set. You've got a day in between, something like that. And that does give a little bit more opportunity to rest and recover and regain.
Right. It's a, now or never is basically the real driving force here with the caveat or the extra of they got plenty of DH options. Right. It's just a hard argument. And I'm the first.
And you don't have 22 games in 23 days. You've got. True. Right. Yeah. Right.
I'm the first one to say that it's a mistake if you're only assuming Buxton's kind of baseline production level at this point is what we saw so far this season. Sure. I don't know why you would treat him differently than any other player in that regard. He's been a .500 slugging percentage, 8-something OPS guy for the past 4 or 5 years. Yeah, he struggled in the first half, in part because he was banged up, in part because he was trying to learn DH, whatever you want to assign that to. And I think, if you assume that's what Buxton is now, which is a 207 hitter with a 710, well, yeah, then he's not going to be very good compared to anybody.
Right.
But I don't know why you would assume that when last year he was far, far better than that.
Right. Even before that, this year he was.
Right. So I don't know. It's a tricky spot. I think it's one of those I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, I guess I still wouldn't bet a whole lot of money on Byron Buxton starting a game in center field at any point this season. But the change in tone for the Twins, like in terms of their public stance, is noteworthy.
Sure. Because
this is the first time they're finally kind of saying it's a possibility, it's something we want, it's something we're pushing towards. But
there's Buxton wants it.
Well, yeah. I mean, Buxton
Right.
Buxton could be a headless, a bodiless head, with no limbs, and you go, "Can you lead off and play center?" And he'd be like, "I'm right out there. I'm do it." Right. But so that's But he seemed to be in good spirits from an injury front.
We'll also see, like, even if everybody agrees this is what we're going to do, we'll see what happens after the first start out there.
Wow.
But the next day after
that's
the first
part
start,
of
you know what I mean? Like,
why they want him to definitely go on a relatively lengthy rehab.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, we will probably get a sense of it watching the rehab. Whether or not
we need you to start back-to-back games in center. We need you to play a full game in center and then come in the next day and be evaluated and all that. I mean, it's possible this is just kind of a moot point, but we'll see. In the meantime, Michael Taylor's going to hit like 25 home runs, playing phenomenal defense, obviously,
except for the Wednesday night, or the Wednesday afternoon overrun the ball. Yeah. I mean, I racked up a lot of the late inning craziness of that to the Heat in Milwaukee. I think everybody was just absolutely fried.
I thankfully wasn't
wilting
because it sounded like even in the press box it was terrible. But yeah, guys yesterday were like, we escaped with our lives. Like Jeffers, like he didn't say I passed out, but the reason he fell twice is because he had just caught
his legs just weren't working anymore. Right? Yeah. Right.
In that heat, Maeda had to change jerseys like 3 times. I thought, watching it, I was like, he's not going to make it through the first inning. He looked like me out there sweating.
It was nuts.
Yeah. So, let's see. I mean, the end goal, like I said, would be Buxton in center, Julian at DH, Polanco at second, Royce Lewis at third.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Within that, also, if you listen to this,
getting Correa a little rest prior to the postseason might be not a bad thing either, Mr. Planterfish.
If you listen to this show last Friday, you were ahead of the curve on the Buxton thing.
Yes,
because there had been some rumblings that I talked about on the show. The other thing that there were some rumblings about that we talked about on the show was that they were finally kind of, what did you call it? Their resolve was crumbling.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I like that. That's what I do to people in life.
Yes.
I just sort of pick at them until their resolve crumbles.
This was,
so I've asked.
I saw you dating.
I saw you dating 10 years
strategy.
ago.
That was it. Yeah, right, sure.
She'll quit at some point. She'll lose the will to live at some point and decide, I can sit with him for the next 50 years, whatever. I just asked about Julian playing first base every day for 5 months, and at some point they finally went, we're thinking about it. I'll go on a second date with you. Yeah, fine. You pick me up, whatever. We'll go to a movie or something. We don't have to talk. Julian's been getting some reps at first, finally. Yeah. I don't know why it took. It just seemed like such an obvious thing this whole time, but better late than never.
I mean, he'll get reps there just about the time Kirilloff comes back. We got to get to that. I want to hear the Kirilloff.
But the weird part about Julian, so Julian's funny because I remember the first time they called up Julian to Target Field, I guess was the second time. He joined him in Boston, I think, the first time. But the first time I talked to him as a member of the Twins at Target Field, I said to him, "Hey, you've been playing only second base, but have you been getting any reps at first?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, they've been giving me some reps at first in St. Paul." And then 4 minutes later, I asked Baldelli, and Baldelli said, "No, he can't play first base." So I was like, well, I'm confused. So now he has been getting reps. We've seen him getting reps at first base. Yeah. And so we asked Julian, how's it going with that? And he goes, it's fine. I played first. It's easy. And he goes, and then as soon as he said it, he goes, "I'm going to regret saying that it's easy." And I was like, okay, I get it, buddy.
That's a knock on wood.
But I mean, he's right. Like, is he going to be a good first baseman? I don't know.
Right.
He's not a good defender. So odds are he's not going to be a great first baseman. But we've seen enough Miguel Sano and Luis Arraez or just random guys play first base. Christian Vasquez plays first base fine. Like we've seen it. That it's not the bar there. There are some guys who just can't play it, but for the most part, you can be passable at first base. But if you're, I guess the logic that always twisted me in knots on this was, if you think if you're willing to play a bad defensive second baseman consistently at second base for a contending team, because you think either he's not as bad as he may seem, or there's room to improve to the point that he can be playable there, well, logically, you could say the same thing about first base and it'll be even easier. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but here's why all this ties back to Buxton, which is the only reason you would really need Julian at first base, because you don't need him at first base right now.
Right.
I mean, you could play him at first base.
I wouldn't mind having him at first base right now.
Yeah, but what does that change between him at DH versus first base?
Oh, no.
Right now.
Yeah, I get it. Right, yes.
But where it would change is if Buxton comes back and isn't playing center field on a given day or just at all, and he's at DH, well, then you have the three infielders, Julian, Polanco, Lewis, and you have two spots for him, unless one of them can play first base. So it can kind of serve as DH for Julian the same way. And so I think that's key, but that, again, could be several weeks out. I mean, he played 1 inning in Milwaukee at first, which is kind of breaking the seal on the concept, which is good. But I don't know if we'll see him start there until Buxton comes back. And then to your point, I think Kirilloff might beat Buxton back, in which case the ability to play first base as a left-handed hitter isn't all that important anyway. Although, so we've talked to Kirilloff a couple times. It's the shoulder. He got the cortisone injection. It's a rest and rehab situation, but it's one of those, like, he's going to have to play through some level of discomfort here. Because he didn't have surgery on it or anything. I mean, he hurt his shoulder and then he re-aggravated it diving on a ball, I don't know, a month and a half ago, whatever it was. The thing with him that they've said is he needs to go on a rehab assignment, because they're taking that stance now with everyone, which I think is good. And what they need to see from him is what we've kind of looked for from him in the past with wrist injuries, which is, is he driving the ball? Yeah, is he elevating the ball and hitting with authority?
He seems to be doing that even with the shoulder injury.
Yeah, although not at the end. At the end, it was just, when they shut him down. But yeah, he had the best stretch of his career, basically, at the beginning of it. But I think it kept getting worse and worse, and he was trying to play through it. But the point they made with him is, similar to Buxton, it doesn't do us any good. We're not lacking in options for the lineup. And so to bring these guys back, whether it's Buxton, whether it's Kirilloff, whether it's Willie Castro, whether it's whoever, it's not just a default of the day they're ready, we're going to bring them back. Because
they've got to be productive.
Right. You have to be productive, because you're replacing somebody in the lineup, most likely, who has been reasonably productive, or at least projects to be, reasonably productive. And so it would be great if they were in a situation where they had Castro, Buxton, and Kirilloff back by mid-September, whatever it is, and they can start to make decisions, and Baldelli's got 15 guys he likes, and he's, mixing and matching, and you're starting to see, a playoff lineup take shape. And maybe that means no Joe Gallo, maybe that means whatever, but they're a long way from that. And I don't mean like they're a long way on the calendar, although they are probably several weeks away from that. I just mean Buxton's got to show he can play center and hit. Right. And then Kirilloff,
stay healthy.
And stay healthy. And Kirilloff, same thing. With Kirilloff, I think you're going to be able to tell. You're going to be able to look at, he's going to go to St. Paul maybe a week from now. I don't know. It could be sooner than that. He seemed pretty ready to go. Like, just the way he was talking. He's been on a hitting progression, is what they call it, which is, take some dry swings. You take a few.
St. Paul's on the road this week.
They're in Omaha.
This week. I wonder if
Willie Castro is joining them in Omaha.
Okay.
Which I'm sure his incredibly pregnant wife loves. I'll be in Omaha.
Who doesn't love to be in Omaha?
Yeah. If you need me, I'll be in the place famous for steaks. But the thing with Kirilloff that you're going to be able to watch is just what are the exit velocities from St. Paul? Is he elevating the ball? Is he, making hard contact and all that? Because I think that's going to be the giveaway. Kirilloff, before he got hurt, he was their best hitter, for a long stretch at that point. And
absolutely.
He was hitting third. He was hitting second. He was coming through in clutch spots. And now he's just been kind of out of sight, out of mind. And some guys have stepped up. Kepler stepped up. Wallner, Lewis, Julian, those guys have all stepped up. Jeffers, obviously. But to be able to add that is a potential game changer against righties in a playoff series, because he's going to bat third for you.
We got enough of a taste of what he is like post All-Star break this year to kind of remember, this is what we were really hoping for. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he seemed to have been all the way back, and then the shoulder injury took him out.
It sucks that he just can't get a clean runway from a health standpoint, and this shoulder injury, I don't think it should just be like brushed off as nothing. Sure. It is not a minor shoulder injury. Right. I mean, he's already been out for I don't know how many weeks at this point, but so that's the plan with him. Let's see, I had one other.
Yet one more example of guys that you want to have healthy come October 1st.
That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, if you could sit here and say, by not, like, if you could make a deal with the injury devil and say, we're not even going to play Buxton or Kirilloff a single game for the rest of the regular season, but somehow miraculously we could snap our fingers and they will be fully healthy for game one of a playoff series. That is a thing you would sign up for immediately today.
Yes.
And certainly 2 weeks from now, if you're way up in the division still, and so that's kind of what I'm getting at with the whole team is It's not that extreme for the whole team, but you want to cross the finish. You don't want to limp across the finish line or crawl across the finish line because then all you're looking at is then you're looking up at a playoff opponent that is probably in better shape, and that's happened too many times to the Twins in the last decade or so.
Basically, since they moved to Target Field.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like every year they are shorthanded going into the postseason.
Okay. Let's see. What are we?
We're at about 120.
Okay. Bullpen. I don't know. Do we talk enough about the bullpen already?
I think we have. I don't know.
Yeah, I think probably we have. The one guy I've gotten a lot of questions about, Cody Funderburk, which is a great name, first of all. There was a guy when I was a kid, played for Ohio State, named Lawrence Funderburk.
Oh, yeah, I remember Lawrence.
Power forward.
Yeah,
played in the NBA, I think.
Right.
I always thought that was an amazing name. Funderburk. Anyway, Cody Funderburk was a former hitter in college that the Twins drafted in the 15th round, I think in 2018, and then converted to a left-handed pitcher.
Right.
And he was a starter at first, and he had, decent track record in the low minors as a starter. And then last year he moved to the bullpen, but this year full-time moved to the bullpen, began at AA and has been with the AAA Saints for the past, several months. Phenomenal numbers as a lefty, as a full-time reliever. He hadn't given him a homer till yesterday, or the day before yesterday. He had pitched like 60 innings with no homers allowed. He's actually been more dominant against righties than lefties, like holding righties to like 180, holding lefties to like 210. 80-something strikeouts in 58 innings or whatever it was. A lot of walks, but also the strike zone, the electronic strike zone in AAA is disastrous.
Really?
Yeah. Oh,
I've not paid much attention to what's going on.
Why the pitching in that league is so terrible. Royce Lewis came up and was like, I'll take it, but they just don't call high strikes anymore at AAA.
Huh.
So I just learned if it's above my chest, just don't swing at it. It's electronic, won't see it as a strike. It's interesting. You look at the numbers in that league. I know everyone's like, how come the Saints are such great hitters, but the Twins aren't great hitters? Well, A, it's AAA pitching, but B, the strikes, the walk rates are crazy. But, so anyway, Cody Funderburk is a lefty, sinker guy, 92, 93, not overwhelming stuff, but certainly major league caliber stuff for a left-handed reliever. Good track record. It's gotten weird with him in that they were without Thielbar for months as their number one lefty, and then their number two lefty, Giovanni Moran, pitched himself out of the bullpen and back to the minors. And yet at no point were they like, oh, there's this 26-year-old great performing left-handed reliever at AAA. Why don't we give him a shot?
Right.
And it's strange to me that as you see Balzavec and Ortega and Cole Sands and Winder and, who knows? I can name 50 other relievers the past couple years that they've just cycled through. Why not give him a look to have a second lefty? And
is he on the 40-man?
No, but that's not a problem at this point, really. There's droppable guys. But
sure.
And now, unfortunately for him, I wonder if that ship has kind of sailed because we talked about the roster expansion stuff. They're about to have kind of a roster logjam. If they didn't think he was worthy of a shot when they sent down Moran 2-3 weeks ago, that would seem to be a 1-for-1. Instead, they called up like Ortega, who's just a low leverage, mop-up guy. They seem to be very. They pad the bullpen with just these only usable in games that don't matter guys. And sometimes that works out. Josh Winder last night came through with a big performance in that type of role.
Sure.
But Cole Sands just collects dust, and Ortega and Balazovic and whoever else is just up and down. And that's part of why the 4 relievers they trust get kind of worked and overworked. Yep. And I'm not saying you're going to call up Cody Funderburk and he's going to become a trustable guy, but there's at least more potential that he could fill a role for you as a second lefty. I don't know. It's weird.
Lefties aren't as important as they were, say, 4 or 5 years ago because you've got the 3-batter rule now.
He's more effective
that's
against righties than lefties. But yes, that's
point.
I'm not. Look, he's somewhere between like Anthony Slamma and Pat Neshek. Whereas there are guys who just have great numbers in the minors, and you think to yourself, why are they not getting an opportunity in the majors? And sometimes it's just because they're not major league caliber pitchers. And I'm willing to believe that. There's a kind of baseline competency that scouts or teams can notice, and guys are able to pile up great numbers in the minors. But I mean, I've seen Funderburk pitch and talk to people certainly who have watched him quite a bit in St. Paul, and it's like this stuff is not any worse than 100 different relievers in the majors right now. So I don't know. That's the one. Brock Stewart made a huge impact for them as a call up from AAA. Other than that, they didn't really have any relievers who were thriving, in part because the International League is a disaster for pitchers, but in part because they just didn't. And so now we're talking about Varland converting to, but the one reliever who has kind of thrived for the Saints all season is Funderburk, and he's a lefty, which is seemingly a need for them, or has been a need for them. So I don't know. It's a weird. Every season there are like a couple guys who you're like, why does this guy not get involved? Like, why they cycled through 8 different guys in this spot, and for a while it was Wallner was that guy. And now we see like sometimes it's really just you need to break the seal with it. Let's see, last couple of notes, and then we'll shut up. I talked about Balazovic's phantom demotion. Walker Jenkins, their first round pick, got promoted from rookie ball to low A.
Right.
Now, that's a big move in general, but in this case, it's about 100 feet. You're going from the backfields of the, what's it called, sports complex?
The Hammond Stadium now.
It's in the something internet, whatever, sports complex.
Oh,
like U.S. Shoot. I don't remember. Whatever it is. But yeah, Hammond Stadium's the big stadium where the Twins and the, not the Miracle, the Mighty Muscles, terrible name, play. And then like 500 feet away are a bunch of backfields, which was where the rookie ball teams play. So Walker Jenkins, like all 17-year-old high school draft picks, was assigned to the lowest level, which is the Florida Complex League, which there aren't even like fans in the stands or anything. But he played 14 games, which is all he could have played because the season ended. And he hit 333 in the 14 games, 390 on base percentage, 537 slugging percentage. I think he had 6 extra base hits and 4 steals. And they had an option to, or the choice option. I don't like to use the word option with minor leaguers. They had the choice to just say, that's good. Now you're done.
Call it a day.
We'll work out.
Good start.
Prepare for the offseason, all that. Instead, because he thrived and because there's 6 weeks left potentially of a season, they moved him up to low A, which is Fort Myers, which again is 200 feet away, but they play at night instead of at 11 a.m. every day. There's actual fans in the stands. There's lights in the ballpark.
And you're 3 years younger than the average age at that point.
More, he's
3.1. I looked it up yesterday. He's 3.1 years younger than the
average player in the Florida State League.
Right.
I mean, it's a big step up. That will be his first time feeling. I don't know what the high school situation is in North Carolina or whatever, but it'll be his first time as a professional feeling like, I'm a baseball player.
Yeah.
Like I'm not just a guy on a backfield here playing in front of 3 scouts or whatever. Like there's lights here. There's thousands of people here. They're selling beer.
I'm facing a bunch of 21, 22-year-olds.
I'm facing a bunch of guys who were also drafted.
Exactly right.
And he made his debut last night, went 0 for 4, playing center field. So that'll be good. I mean, he could potentially get another, decent amount of games in to evaluate him.
Sure.
The first 14 that he played
all good. It's all good.
Yeah, he looks
all the
good
news
so
is
far.
Good here. Yeah.
So there's that.
Probably Bum went 0 for 4 in his first game.
Yeah, they should demote him. Send him to Dominican Summer League. It's a even lower level. Last 2 things. Well, that's one thing. We don't have time. I was going to finish with a Josh Donaldson story, but maybe I won't.
We'll see about that one. Wait till the Yankees finish under 500, then we can talk about it.
Yeah. Well, he's done with them. So, I'm trying to make cement bones Wallner stick, and I feel I've got momentum on my side. I heard Perkins say it on the broadcast.
All right.
So, man, I slipped him a 20 to say it on the broadcast. And a bunch of people sent us crude photoshops of like the old timey cigar box baseball cards.
Yeah, there you go.
And then they just stuck a photo of Matt Wallner and it said Cement Bones Wallner.
Nice.
He since then, by the way, he got hit by another pitch and shook it off. Like this nickname, unfortunately, like if he keeps getting hit on the hand by a pitch, he will at some point break his hand. Like he's not Terminator.
Maybe.
Or he is.
Maybe
in which case,
vibranium.
Yeah, that's right. Cement Bones. So I'm trying to make Cement Bones Wallner stick as a nickname. I feel it's a good nickname. I got momentum. So I feel like we're really pushing that. So anybody now listening to this, now I put it on the free show, Cement Bones Wallner. And that comes from he got hit by a pitch in the Pittsburgh series.
Right.
Or the Detroit series? Detroit series. No, Pittsburgh series. Barucki hit him with a pitch.
I think it was Pittsburgh.
And it was actually a foul ball. It was on a swing. And he immediately started shaking his hands, and it looked bad. Like I'm like, oh, God, he just broke his hand.
Right.
And then afterward, we saw Baldelli 5 minutes after the game, and we're like, how's Wallner doing? And he goes, I don't know. I thought he broke his hand. This guy's got like cement for bones or something like that. And I thought that's a 1800 style nickname, Cement Bones Wallner. So I'm trying to make that happen. And then
you should mention what's going on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, they fired everybody basically. Although it sounds like they fired Kenny Williams, who's used to be their GM and is now just president or whatever. Who's been their GM for 20 years basically. Yeah. And then Rick Hahn, who
is their actual GM,
was their actual GM. Fired him. He's been there for 10 years, I think. Kenny Williams has been there for like 20 years. It's deserved. They basically went through 2 full rebuilds with the same front office, and neither of them were successful, really. I mean, they won like 1 division title or whatever. But it's like they haven't announced the replacement, but all the reporting that I've seen is they're thinking about just promoting the number 3 guy
inside,
which is Chris Getz, who used to be a infielder for the Royals.
Is he the minor league guy?
He's their player development guy, yeah. Which their player development hasn't been good.
Of course.
Right. But he's seen as like
the only guys they ever develop are like their first round picks.
Right. That's true. But he's seen as he's like 40. He's a recently retared player. He's seen as kind of a up and coming front office star.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then
I think they didn't want to just get him out of the player development role.
Well, maybe that too, yeah.
Kick him upstairs.
True, yeah. But it sounds like if he were to be hired, his number 2 guy would be Dayton Moore.
Oh, wow.
Who was just fired as the 20-plus year Royals GM, and who was the GM of the Royals when Chris Getz was the second baseman for the Royals.
Gotcha.
And so that's really playing the hits, but playing the non-hits.
Right.
I mean, look, the Royals won a World Series, so all hail Dayton Moore. They did something the Twins would love to do, obviously. But Royals,
Kenny Williams won a World Series too, by the way.
Yeah, true.
Right.
But the Royals were pretty horse bleep for the last 20 years. I mean, other than like 3 years, they were terrible. And he just got fired by the Royals. So to have him come right back and be a number 2 guy, maybe that suits him better or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it just seems, I don't know Chris Getz, like his whole story or anything, but if you're firing the 2 main guys in the front office and you're just promoting the 3rd guy in the front office, I feel like Twins fans should like that. Right. Like that seems like good news. And the best news for Twins fans would have been no firings. Just let Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams run this thing.
But this is a close second. Like when their weakness seems to be their minor league development, and their strength is making some trades that bring in some valuable performing players. I always felt like that was Kenny Williams' strength, was trading. He would bring in the players that have been productive have been players that they have traded for. So you end up firing the guy who makes the trades and promoting the guy who's
who knows
doing the minor league development.
I think it's deserved that they clean house, obviously.
Sure.
But it's been 10 plus years with this group and they just haven't won anything. But yeah, and then the other thing is, this hasn't been official either, but it sounds like Tony La Russa is coming back for some sort of advisory role, which is just Jerry Reinsdorf, who's their 85-year-old owner or whatever, just bringing back the same cronies that he brought back in the first place, which is how they got into this mess to begin with. So yeah, I mean, you aren't going to get many tears from from Twins fans, obviously. But
keep on doing what you're doing, Jerry.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, no firings would be the best. But you think about this division, which is now in the last 9 months, 10 months, 3 of the 5 teams had fired their front office.
Yeah, that's true.
Tigers did it.
Yeah.
Royals did it with Dayton Moore, and now the White Sox have done it.
Yeah.
And Cleveland is certainly not going to fire its front office, but Terry Francona, the cat's out of the bag that he's retiring, basically. I mean, he won't say it, but he's retiring, which I'll be very curious if the same Twins fans who every year have bombarded us with, well, the Twins are going to get caught from behind by these Cleveland Guardians because they got Terry Francona leading the charge. He's a genius Hall of Fame manager, which is all true.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Are then going to be like, wow, that's great for the Twins that he's retiring. Or if the narrative will shift to, well, he wasn't that good of a manager the last several years anyway, which I do wonder how much of that kind of, I don't know, lame duck status has played a part in their overall performance this year. I guess it's chicken or the egg.
Yeah,
Maybe their
fair.
overall performance has played a part in his lame duck status.
That's a fair question.
But it's health related. I mean, he's older. He's got a lot of hip and knee, and he's missed time with some gastrointestinal problems. Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of health problems. So, I mean, I hope he rides off into the sunset and has a great retirement. He's, by all accounts, a great dude. I know Baldelli loves him. Like, Baldelli played for him 1 year in Boston and just loves him. But
Falvey, too.
Yeah, Falvey worked with
Falvey
him.
for seemingly.
Absolutely. But, yeah, so it is interesting that when there's a team that just can't seem to quite get any traction, and that's how I would describe the Guardians, which is they haven't been 500 for like 3 months. And I know we've joked about this, but the Twins fans' perception of them is skewed. Twins fans view them as this like terror that's behind them, but Guardians fans view them as this very flawed, like just hopeless team. And I just
we mostly remember them last year is the problem, right? Yeah, we haven't seen them that much this year.
And I wonder how much of that is like, you know, they know Francona's kind of, I don't want to say checked out, but he's on his way out, and they're trading guys at the deadline and all this stuff. It's like you're not really getting the vibe from staff or front office that like, well, this is a team that's going to take a charge here. They've also had some injuries and stuff, but
I thought about that. The fact that we saw Cleveland 19 times last year. This year we've seen them 7.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not too surprising that our thought process about what Cleveland is having trouble adjusting to the fact that they're a very different team this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I would maybe be the same way, except I've basically been scoreboard watching through MLB TV, and I just put the Cleveland game on my laptop while I'm at Target Field or when they're on the road, and I've watched like probably 80% of Cleveland's total innings since the All-Star break, or just had it on at least in the background, and I mean, they're not good. Like, they have some great players, and their young pitching is good. I mean, they're going to...
just before we go into 6 games.
Yeah, well,
that's what you're doing.
Look, if the Twins are relying on me to not jinx them, they're in trouble.
Okay.
I can't even jinx my own life.
We can all blame Gleeman.
Yeah, they do that anyway.
They get swept by Cleveland.
What was I? Oh, Cleveland's going to have enough trouble holding off Detroit for second at this point. I mean, honestly, and I'm not saying Detroit is anything,
right?
But like, what are they? A game up on Detroit, or a game and a half, maybe? A game up on like
we helped them. That's right. We were helping Detroit. That's why we lost 8 out of 13.
That's what they were doing. You figure the Twins were like, it hurts us, but it really hurts Cleveland, just from a mentality standpoint. Yeah, I mean,
Francona gets so tired of it, he'll retire.
Yeah, it's true. I'm very curious to see who replaces him, because that job theoretically is a good job, except not if they're not going to spend any money and they're going to kind of keep trading away people. But
they got the new ownership coming up. I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, they could, if they spend money, Cleveland could be a terror.
Yeah,
Cleveland could actually be the way Twins fans perceive them to be, which is very scary. But if they don't,
thank you to Hatch. Go to hatch.co/Gleeman. Check that out. RotoWire, we got that great free promo there. No credit card required. Stamps.com and Game Time. Download that Game Time app. We're going to be back on Monday to recap the Texas series and talk a little bit about the Cleveland series. Great week to join the Patreon.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to be talking Cleveland. We might drop a couple episodes just to talk about the Cleveland thing.
Yes, it's midweek episodes. You don't have to wait a full week for our next free episode. We'll be doing 2 or more
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday, whatever. Beyond that,
maybe what we do is we drop one. Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we do. I think we drop one Wednesday afternoon, maybe to cover the entire Cleveland series immediately
I
afterwards.
like you use the vernacular of like album sales. Like we're going to drop a new single.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Us sitting at a table talking about the Twins. We'll drop this hot new single.
So those of you who are Patreon, we're looking forward to talking to you Monday and recapping the Rangers series. For the rest of you, we will be talking to you on Friday.
Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. See you there. Bye-bye.
Gleeman